House will come to order. Hannah Neville and Mary Caitlin Neville, who attend American Academy in Castle Rock, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and they are the daughters of Minority Leader Patrick Neville.
Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic with which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Mr. Randall, please call the roll.
Go ahead and just start calling them afterwards. I think that's good.
Representatives Arndt. Becker J. Becker K.
Excused.
Beckman. Benavides. Bridges. Buck. Buckner. Carver. Catlin. Coleman. Covarrubias. Danielson. Escar. Escar. Everett, excused. Exum. Foot. Garnett. Janal. Gray. Hamner. Hamner.
Excused.
Hanson. Harrod. Hooten. Humphrey. Jackson. Kennedy. Kraft-Tharp. Landgraf. Landgraf. Lawrence. Lebsock. Lee. Leonard. Lewis. Liston. Lontine. Lundeen. McKean. McLaughlin. Representative Hamner is present. Melton. Michelson Janae. Neville. Neville.
Well, we know he's here. Excused. Oh, there he is.
Representative Neville is present. Pabon. Pedersen. Rankin. Ransom. Ryer. Roberts. Rosenthal. Sane. Salazar. Sias. Sias.
Excused.
Singer. Thurlow. Valdez. Van Winkle. Weissman. Willett. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Wist. Young. Madam Speaker.
Present.
Representative Sias is present.
Representative Sias is present. Madam Majority Leader Becker is present. With 63 members present and one excused, we do have a quorum. Representative Weissman. Good morning, Representative Weissman.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. It is a pleasure to serve with you.
It is a pleasure to serve with you, too.
I move that the reading of the Journal of yesterday, Thursday, January 11, be dispensed with, and that the Journal be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
Members, you have heard the motion. All of those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying no. No. The motion passes. Announcements and introductions. Members, we have several announcements and introductions this morning. Representative Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honor and a pleasure to serve with you.
It is an honor and pleasure to serve with you, too.
Thank you. So, members, so I put on your desk and also sent an email yesterday, a revised and updated invite for an event that TECO is organizing and sponsoring. And it is a meet and greet and also to celebrate, yes, the Chinese New Year is next month, but we're just kind of celebrating a little early. So Taiwan is an important trade partner for the United States, so hopefully you can meet these folks, get some coffee and a light breakfast. So again, that's next Tuesday when we come back to the Capitol from 8 to 9 a.m. Hopefully you all can stop by and greet them. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Representative Rosenthal. I'm going to try and stop by. Any further announcements or introductions? Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You remember I made the announcement the other day that it's going to cost you money. Well, I want you to know we're going into a long weekend, and next week we're going to be bugging you daily for contributions towards purchasing that Colorado steer from the National Western Junior Livestock Association. So, when you bring your checks on Tuesday, they need to be made out to the National Western Junior Livestock Sale. When you bring cash, we will take that. I'm not going to tell you what you can do with your own stuff, but this is actually related to your job, so that's just a hint. Second thing, those of you that may be interested in when the next hot dog day is.
Members, we have important announcements and introductions that are being done. Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could we find the group and put that in the pot for National Western?
I like that. People who are loud on the floor will start to get fined.
The second announcement, folks, is that the Sportsman's Caucus Hot Dog Day will be the fourth Thursday this month because we start later, and it will be the third Thursday each month thereafter. So mark your calendars, fourth Thursday this month and third Thursday thereafter.
All right. Thank you, Representative Wilson. Representative Arndt.
Thank you very much. Oh, I believe we have a cash donation. Oh, for the steer. Well, there we go. Uh-oh. Here we go.
Uh-oh. Got to see a little competition down there. Representative Wilson.
Oh.
Madam Speaker, we both got cash donations, and I just wanted to point out the left side of the aisle is down $30 already.
Any further announcements or introductions? Representative Kennedy. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, if you don't have lunch plans next Wednesday, we're starting up the Public Investment Caucus again. We're going to have Carol Hedges from the Colorado Fiscal Institute talking all about the new federal tax law and what it means for Colorado taxpayers as well as the Colorado budget. So if you want to dig a little deeper into some tax policy to start off the session right, come on by next Wednesday. And please RSVP if you want a lunch. We're going to be across the street in the State Services Building in the big conference room. Thank you.
All right. Any further announcements or introductions? Representative Thurlow. I think you were waiting there longer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning, members. I just wanted to remind everybody that next Tuesday after the long weekend, don't forget that 4 to 6 Tuesday afternoon at the University Club, Colorado Mesa University from Grand Junction, one of the fastest growing universities in Colorado, where our esteemed Assistant Minority Leader, Wist, is a former trustee, will be holding their annual gathering. It's at the University Club. President Foster will be there. We would love to have you all meet the folks from CMU at Tuesday afternoon, 4 to 6.
All right. Any further announcements or introductions? Representative Benavides.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And good morning, colleagues. I just wanted to let you know you may see a group of 30 young students visiting the Capitol between 10 and 10:45 this morning. They are from the Global Intermediate Academy. They are guests of Senator Moreno and myself, so please reach out to them and say hello this morning. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Representative Benavides. Any further announcements or introductions? Representative Pabon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members of the House Finance Committee, listen up. Members of the House Finance Committee.
Hold on, let me help you out. Representative Pabon.
We have a special meeting on Tuesday morning for the House Finance Committee. If you're on that committee, we are meeting at 8 a.m. in LSBA to discuss a bill that concerns nurse licensed practitioners, some enhanced version of that. We will have Representative Kraft-Tharp and someone else there to present that bill. I don't actually know. I don't know what the bill number is, but you should look at your calendar. You should be mindful that this is not our regularly scheduled programming, that we have a special episode of the Finance Committee Tuesday morning, so you're not going to have any reminders. Remember, we have Monday off. Tuesday morning, first thing is going to be Finance Committee. And if you're not there, you won't be excused. Actually, maybe. You probably still will be, but I'm just saying that. Senate Bill 27. Senate Bill 27 by McKean, I assume, and Kraft-Tharp.
Oh, Representative Young and Representative Hamner and Representative Rankin, the all-powerful Joint Budget Committee members that we have here this morning.
Why, thank you, Madam Speaker.
I am honored to be in your presence.
Members, look who you have in front of you. And here we are, photo op. This is what we look like before we get into the budget process, and we'll do a picture at the end of what we look like then. Okay.
I think we should do that for the Speaker and the Majority Leader too,
Okay,
before
so this
and
is our
after.
before picture. Thank you. You saw big smiles. We all look so young and fresh.
Happy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at any rate, members, we do want to call your attention to some important materials that you find on your desk this morning.
Who's first?
Young.
So, members, you may have seen, and I apologize for the raspy voice, but you have two blue books, or books with a blue stripe on them. The real small one is the one you probably want to look at. It says Budget and Brief Fiscal Year 2017-18.
How we're really going to emphasize.
That's the current year we're in.
Meetings coming up. Yes.
That's the work you did last April and May when we summed up the long bill. This Budget and Brief is the Cliff Notes. If it doesn't give you enough information, here's the whole thing. Are you really going to look at this one? Probably not. You'll probably start with this one, but if you do have questions about a particular department, there are the details. This is the current budget year we're in, 2017, 2018, and the good news is you have it all in your hands. The bad news is in just a few weeks we're going to come with supplemental requests to change it.
And members, another important document you have on your desk is the staff budget briefing summary. So if all of you could show that you're listening by holding up your little staff budget. Oh, look at that. Very well done. Thank you. Yes, this is a really important document for you. We'll be starting our joint meetings next week with your committees and the Senate committee with the Joint Budget Committee to talk about the important issues that the governor has requested in the 18-19 budget. Also, issues that have been flagged by our Joint Budget Committee staff are highlighted in this document. And this year, as we meet with each of the committees, and we'll be starting with the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee next Wednesday, we really want to hear from you about what you think about the budget requests, whether or not they address the concerns and priorities that you have as members of your committee, and how the Budget Committee members can better represent your interests as we craft and develop this year's long bill.
So I'm reading a book called The Budget is the Answer. It was written in the mid-'70s by a Senator Shoemaker who had been on the Joint Budget Committee for 12 years. I don't know why he's even still alive, but you know, you can open that book to any page and you could read some of the Joint Budget Committee was established in 1959. And almost every year somebody's complained about it being too powerful. So thank you, Madam Speaker, for carrying on that tradition. But this is a long-standing issue, and I would invite you all to go back and read about that book about the history of the Joint Budget Committee, because we're really just carrying on the tradition and getting the same concerns. But we are very concerned about those concerns, and that's why, as Representative Hamner just described, our chairman, we are asking you to look differently at these upcoming meetings. The first one is with the Military Affairs, State Affairs, Military Affairs Committee on what day?
Wednesday.
Wednesday of next week. So we're sending out a list of questions that we would like feedback from you as we go through those. You've all been through your SMART Act hearings. You should have some ideas now about your departments that you oversee, but you also have the governor's budget request from 1 November. We want you to look at the governor's budget request and tell us what you don't like about it. You know, think about the amendments you would make to that request.
And what you like about it.
And what you like about it. Where would you like to spend less money or more money on the thousands of line items that we will be considering in the next few months? This would be a really good start. You've asked for opportunities to give us more feedback, so we would like you to exercise this opportunity to give us a lot of feedback. And this is a big deal to us. This is a different way of looking at these upcoming meetings, so please take them seriously.
Thank you, members. We look forward to working with you and your committees as we develop the budget draft for next year. Thank you.
All right, thank you to our members of the Joint Budget Committee, and that was all in good fun. I think our process works pretty darn well here as it relates to balancing the budget. Representative Young.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now approach you as chair of the Appropriations Committee. Members, who's on the Appropriations Committee? Raise your hand. All one of you. Oh, there we go. Now we're starting to get there.
All right, who's listening?
If you're not sure you're on Appropriations Committee, then take a good hard look at it, because as you heard Representative Pabon mention that there is a meeting Tuesday morning before we gavel in. Appropriations is going to be meeting on that same bill upon adjournment. That's Tuesday. Upon adjournment, Appropriations will meet to consider the bill that Finance will be considering before we gavel in on Tuesday. Be there or be square.
All right, Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'd like to call down to the well the members and the new members of the Capitol Choir, because I know you're looking at me, Representative Van Winkle. He's like, oh, did she forget that it's my birthday? Or will she forget that it's my birthday? She did not. So, members of the Capitol Choir, you sounded so beautiful on Wednesday when we serenaded Representative Lawrence. Today is where are you? Calling Capitol Choir members to the well. I'm not going to do a solo today. And we will be serenading, where are you? Representative Van Winkle's birthday today. So, members of the Capitol Choir,
it's just
would
me.
You please? Wow, come on over here, come on. Are we ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Representative Van Winkle. Thank you. Representative Rosenthal, we need practice.
Sorry.
Any further announcements or introductions? Representative Melton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I'd like to present a tribute Today is Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated Day at the Capitol. And this year, the Chi Phi chapter of Denver, or well, actually just a month ago, the Chi Phi chapter of Denver celebrated its 90th anniversary of serving in the Denver metro area of the state of Colorado. And so the state of Colorado and the House of Representatives convened in the 71st General Assembly hereby extends sincerest accommodations to Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated Chi Phi chapter on the occasion of their 90th anniversary. Founded in November 17, 1911 on the campus of Howard University, Omega Psi Phi has stayed true to the motto of friendship is essential to the soul. In Denver, Colorado, Chi Phi chapter of Omega Psi Phi was founded on December 27th, 1927. In its 90 years of existence, the gentlemen of the organization have made tremendous contributions to the African American community in Denver, providing social justice, community service, neighborhood improvements, youth mentoring, college scholarships, and voter registration and outreach. The members of Chi Phi chapter have demonstrated the 4 cardinal principles of Omega Psi Phi: manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift. And we congratulate them on their 90th anniversary. And members, I can say that I am also a member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, the Chi Phi chapter, but before I became a member, I was a youth growing up in this city, and it was these men that helped mentor me into the man that I am. And so I do thank you all and ask that you stand as I present this tribute to the bossless Eric Hamilton.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. Representative Buckner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would just like to add to this tribute that my husband, the Honorable the late husband, John W. Buckner, was charter member of the Omega Psi Phi chapter at Ball State University, and I was Omega Psi Phi sweetheart. So, congratulations. It's so wonderful to have you here today, and we appreciate everything you do for education and for the community. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so very much. For further announcements or introductions, Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 2 announcements. There is a memo on your desk signed by me that states our amendment policy. You all know it, except for maybe a couple of the new members. Please let bill sponsors know if you are going to be offering an amendment to their bill. And if it's a multi-page amendment, meaning more than 1 page, you need to give them at least 24 hours. You need to give the committee members a copy of the amendment 24 hours before the hearing. So all that is outlined here. If you need information about the amendments process, let me know. And then I'm just going to remind you again, as I did yesterday, about the bill introduction deadline. Your bills will be sent to the front desk for introduction unless you ask legal services to deliver it to you instead. If you're not able to finalize your bill, you need to ask for late bill status. If your bill is delivered to you, don't forget to turn it into the front desk no later than 4:30 on Tuesday. And once a bill is delivered to the front desk or for you for introduction, it shouldn't be returned to legal services. You need to, if you have changes to make, you do that by amendment during the bill process. And then please don't return bills that are delivered for intro to legal services to add co-sponsors. Sponsors can be added by the House front desk, that's Marilyn, right there, or in rolling room staff before your bill is sent to the printer. And if you have questions about adding co-sponsors, please contact the House front desk. And then, Mr. Minority Leader, is he gone? Oh, there he is. Are you going to come with me?
Maybe now some people will pay attention.
You go.
Oh, go ahead. Okay, so members, some pretty exciting news. The House committee rooms have been revamped. They look nice, they look sharp. So we're encouraging all folks to, after we're done here, Go on down and check them out.
So upon adjournment, not before, go down and see the magnificent new House committee rooms. They'll be open for you to check out. Staff and the contractors did a fantastic job. And thanks to you all who voted for the money to do that. So thanks.
And our chief clerk deserves a huge thank you for all of her work and her entire team. Further announcements and introductions. Seeing no further announcements or introductions, we are going to do confirmation of the audit committee. Mr. Randall, please read the list of appointments to the audit committee.
Legislative Audit Committee, 4 members, Representatives Kraft-Tharp, Chair, Leonard, Sane, and Winter.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the appointments to Legislative Audit Committee be confirmed.
Pursuant to 2-3-101 Colorado Revised Statutes, the appointment to the Legislative Audit Committee requires a recorded vote. Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask for a brief recess.
Okay, the House will stand in a very brief recess. All right, the House will come back to order. Madam Majority Leader.
Do you want to read the names again?
Mr. Randall, please read the list of appointments to the Audit Committee.
Committee of Legislative Audit, Representatives Kraft-Tharp, Leonard, Sane, and Winter.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the appointments to Ledge Audit be confirmed. This is our first recorded votes, folks, so take your seats, please.
And Madam Majority Leader, do you, just to make it clear for the record, do you want to withdraw your previous motion that you made?
I don't think I need to. He just reread. Okay. I withdraw the prior motion, and I now move the appointments to Ledge Audit be confirmed.
Okay. All right. Pursuant to 2-3-101 Colorado Revised Statutes, the appointments to the Legislative Audit Committee requires a recorded vote. Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Benavides, Representative McKean, Representative Lundeen, please vote. Representative Lundeen. Well, fine's going to be at least at $1. Now we're up to $2. We're up to $3. All right. Upon request, Representative Lundin will be excused. Please close the machine. Ah. With 62 yes votes, 0 no votes, and 2 excused, that motion to approve the appointments of Legislative Audit Committee is approved. Next up, we have the House Employee Resolution. Our next order of business is introduction of resolutions. Mr. Randall, please read the title of H.R. 18-1001.
House Resolution 1001 by Representative Buckner concerning employees and positions for the House of Representatives convened in the second regular session of the 71st General Assembly.
Representative Buckner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, fine, right? Madam Speaker, I move that H.R. 18-1001 be adopted. This is the resolution naming employees to House positions.
The motion is for the adoption of H.R. 1001. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying no. The resolution is adopted. Let's go ahead and open the machine for co-sponsors. Representative Daniels, we're on co-sponsors. Look at them already going back. Any additional options for co-sponsors? Anybody else want to co-sponsor? Please close the machine. And Representative Lundin, thank you so much for joining us. He's still not paying attention. Representative Lundin, thank you for joining us. That will be a $5 fine. Oh, goodness. Next up, employee salary range resolution. Mr. Randall, please read the title of SJR 18-001.
Senate Joint Resolution 1 by Senator Hobart, also Representative Buckner, concerning the officers and employees of the second regular session of the 71st General Assembly.
Representative Buckner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that SJR 18-1-001 be adopted. This is the resolution that sets the pay ranges for House and Senate employees.
All right, the motion is for the adoption of SJR 18-001. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying no. The resolution is adopted. Co-sponsors. Co-sponsors. Mr. Randall, please close the machine. Will the staff please gather in the well to receive their oath? We're going to now move on to the staff oath of office.
I'll say a few words. No problem.
It's not a problem as long as it's only a few.
I'm an
right?
eloquent speaker.
You go.
Oh, yeah. I feel like I should be here.
Have to get up close and personal.
Oh, we're facing this way. I don't know. We'll face whichever way here.
They'll turn us around anyway. To face that way.
Yeah.
That's where I want you.
There you go.
Yeah?
I thought, where did you go?
I couldn't walk down the middle of the rest of you.
It's the only time all year you get to walk down the middle.
We're supposed to face the speaker, I guess? Yeah. You know, we're taking pictures.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, is everybody in the well from staff? Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I say your name. Let's try that again. So when I say your name, that's the only part that you don't repeat after me. So say your name, but then repeat the rest. I should have explained that first. I say your name.
Isabel Trujillo.
Do solemnly swear that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Colorado, and that I will faithfully perform the duties of my office to the best of my knowledge and ability. So help me God. Thank you.
As soon as they go.
I think some folks want to take a picture. If you want to go ahead and come back for a minute, if you want to be part of the picture.
There we go. That's right.
Yeah.
Scoot in.
If you'd like to be part of the picture, come on back.
I'm in the middle.
Yeah,
So
you can't squeeze anymore.
Take forever. We have other place to be.
You can't get any tighter.
There we go. We can put.
Enough already.
Keep scooting. Keep scooting. There we go.
Taking a photo.
Yeah.
Thank you for all of the work that you do on our behalf.
Powerful is when I got sworn in as a state trooper years ago.
All right, next up.
Oh, in some of the reps' offices.
Persanta, there's MLK resolution isn't here yet, so Sarah, they're still talking. So we're gonna have to take a recess.
Oh, is that SCR 002? Oh, okay.
All right, we are already on day 3, waiting for the Senate. Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House stand in a brief recess while we wait for the first resolution, Martin Luther King Day resolution, to be done in the Senate. I don't know how much longer they're going to take. We know how the Senate is. So we will stay nearby. It could be 5, 10, or 15 minutes. So just stay nearby, and then we will reconvene to hear the Martin Luther King Day resolution.
All right, thank you, Madam Majority Leader. Representative Lundeen, stay close by. Seeing no objection, The House will stand in recess. House will come to order. Message from the Senate.
Madam Speaker, the Senate has adopted and transmits herewith Senate Joint Resolution 2.
Introduction of resolution.
Senate Joint Resolution 2 by Senators Marble and Williams, also Representatives Buck and Harrod, concerning the commemoration of the birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to suspend the rules for the immediate consideration of Senate Joint Resolution 002.
The motion is to suspend the rules for immediate consideration of SJR 002. If there is no objection, we'll proceed with a voice vote on this motion. And on the following motion, all of those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying no. And motion passes. Representative Buck and Representative Harrod.
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Joint Resolution to commemorate
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and ask that the resolution be read at length.
Mr. Randall, please read the resolution at length.
Senate Joint Resolution 2 concerning the commemoration of the birthday of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Whereas the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born in Atlanta, Georgia on January 15, 1929, graduated from Morehouse College with a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1948, graduated from Crozer Theological Seminary in 1951, and received a PhD from Boston University in 1955. And whereas Reverend Dr. King's faith, resiliency, and commitment to justice became known worldwide through his speeches, writings, and actions. And whereas Reverend Dr. King declared that the moral responsibility to aid the oppressed did not stop at the edge of his street, town, or state, when he wrote, "I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And whereas Reverend Dr. King withstood attacks on his home and family, among numerous other threats and setbacks, standing firm in his conviction that although the arc of the moral universe is long, it bends towards justice. And whereas Reverend Dr. King led the Montgomery bus boycott, a 13-month protest beginning in 1955 against the segregated city bus lines. And whereas the Montgomery bus boycott led to the integration of the Montgomery city bus system and is widely credited as the beginning of the civil rights movement in America. And whereas in 1957, Reverend Dr. King was elected president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an organization formed to provide leadership for the burgeoning civil rights movement. And whereas between 1957 and 1968, Reverend Dr. King spoke more than 2,500 times, wrote 5 books as well as numerous articles, led protests, helped register African American voters, was arrested more than 20 times, was awarded 5 honorary degrees, was named Man of the Year by Time magazine, and became the symbolic leader of the African American community as well as a world figure. And whereas on August 28, 1963, Reverend Dr. King directed the March on Washington, wherein more than 200,000 Americans gathered in the name of equality and civil rights, and which culminated in Reverend Dr. King's historic I Have a Dream speech. And whereas the leadership of Reverend Dr. King was instrumental in bringing about landmark legislation, such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibited segregation in public accommodations and facilities and banned discrimination based on race, color, or national origin, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which eliminated remaining legal barriers to voting for disenfranchised African American voters. And whereas in 1964, Reverend Dr. King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his tireless and selfless work in the pursuit of justice for African Americans and other oppressed people in America. And whereas Reverend Dr. King's 13 years of nonviolent leadership ended abruptly and tragically when on April 4th, 1968, he was assassinated while standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. And whereas Reverend Dr. King's life and work continue to echo in our lives as we strive to reach the lofty goal he set when he said, "Let us all hope that the dark clouds of racial prejudice will soon pass away and the deep fog of misunderstanding will be lifted from our fear-drenched communities. And in some not too distant tomorrow, the radiant stars of love and brotherhood will shine over our great nation with all their scintillating beauty." And whereas Reverend Dr. King's birthday is a federal holiday in the United States and a state holiday in the state of Colorado, which is celebrated each year on the 3rd Monday in January, and whereas on Monday, January 15th, 2018, we celebrate the 32nd anniversary of Reverend Dr. King's holiday, now therefore be it resolved by the Senate of the 71st General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the House of Representatives concurring herein, that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, hereby encourage appropriate observances, ceremonies, and activities to commemorate the federal and state legal holiday honoring the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. throughout all cities, towns, counties, school districts, and local governments within Colorado.
Representative Buck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I am honored and I'm humbled to carry this resolution to recognize a truly great man and acknowledge the day that we honor him. At this time, I'd like to show a glimpse of this speech, August 28th, 1963, on the March on Washington.
am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities. Knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friend, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream.
Representative Buck. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I am honored because of the high degree of respect that I have for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., his life, achievements, his legacy, and most importantly, his resolute adherence to his faith. But I am humbled when I consider the significant contributions he made to our society in the brief 39 years. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. devoted his life to freedom, equality, and civil rights, and he fought for these ideals with a dedication, devotion, and most importantly, a relentless theme of nonviolence and love, even in the face of fierce and sometimes physical, forceful opposition. Dr. King's message is just as relevant today as it was during his lifetime. We should look to the extraordinary life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as we consider how to treat our fellow man. And I submit to all of you that we should not focus on the word diversity due to the division that it causes us, instead of the word unity. We recognize that we have more that unites us than what divides us. And at the end of the day, we all bleed the same color. Consider the life and message of Dr. Martin Luther King. Throughout, he maintained a consistent response to adversity. He was not a response of hatred, violence, bitterness. It was a response of one feeling, and that was love. As Dr. King himself so wisely pointed out in his book, Strength to Love, and I recommend it to all of you, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. It's believed in this quote came from his sermon that Dr. Martin Luther King gave in 1957, over 60 years ago. It was a sermon in which Dr. King was urging his followers to love his enemies and their enemies. What a message. As I mentioned above, it's a message that is relevant today as it was 60 years ago. Like Dr. Martin Luther King, we all dream. We can all dream of a world free of hate, bias, and discrimination. What a wonderful dream that is. Dr. King believes his message lives in my heart. Dr. King's message lives in my heart, and I ask that he all lives in your hearts. We can best honor Dr. King by responding to injustice as he preached, and more importantly, as he acted. Not with hatred, not with disrespect, not with violence, but with love. Love, understanding, and forgiveness. I hope you know how much I personally mean what I just said. Like King, I am speaking merely of the evidence of love, or not emotional bosh, as he called it. I'm speaking of a true, heartfelt love for your fellow man, regardless of race, creed, color, ethnic origin, disability, or sex. It is particularly important for all of us in this room to hear this message of love from Dr. King. As Dr. King observed, that power without love is reckless and abusive, and the love without power is sentimental and anemic. So in a way, it's fitting that we are starting our 2018 second regular session so near to the day that has been designated to honor and commemorate the great Martin Luther King Jr. We have the power due to our elected positions. Now let's add our love of our respect for our fellow man, and so that we are not reckless and abusive with that power. It is impossible to look back at the life and teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. without a feeling of awe and admiration. And in the face of his extremely strong opposition and often face of defeat, he maintained his faith. It was his guiding light which gave him strength, and it allowed him to provide powerful, consistent message in the face of adversity. It is no wonder that Dr. King has inspired so many, and without a doubt, he will continue to inspire more. As I reflected in the message of my speech today, I realized that we sometimes even witness bias, hatred bias on party preference. As to that, I want to go on record today as I want you all to know that I love each and every one of you in this room today. No matter what side of the aisle you sit on, brothers and sisters, we all bleed the same color. So it is with deep respect and love that I offer these words in support of this resolution of these chambers and to honor the great man, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Buck. Representative Melton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and members. I rise in strong support of SJR 18002. And I say 18 because that is an important year. It is very important that we're doing this resolution so close to the beginning of the session here in 2018. It will be this April that will mark the 50th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King's death. And when I think about his death and I think about what we are facing today as a nation, it's almost ironic because there are attitudes and there are things that are coming back up that almost make it seem like his voice has died. What I mean by that is we've seen protests and we've seen rhetoric, we've seen a number of different things come up in the news this past year that makes me wonder, has Martin Luther King's message of love and of unity, has that died? We have heard, unfortunately, national leaders call white supremacists decent folks or good guys or whatever it was that he said. We've heard that same person call Mexicans racist. We've seen him say that people from Africa or from Haiti, they live in shitholes. And I'm sorry to have to repeat that word, but that is what has been said.
Representative Melton and members, I would ask that we do not cuss during this presentation of the resolution.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, I apologize for the word. I'm quoting the current leader of the free world. And it's those type of words, though, that make me wonder, did Dr. King's message die? Did that message die in terms of love and of hope and of equality and dignity? Members, we can't allow it to die. This is the 6th year I've been down here, and this is the 6th year that we've run this resolution. And I can tell you that this year, this may be the most important resolution that we run, because we've got to turn things around. We've got to end this attitude of divisiveness. We've got to come together as one and put aside our differences of race and of ethnicity and of race and gender and religion and belief. I'm so glad that you said that, yes, we all do bleed the same color, and that is true. Now, we may disagree on different issues from time to time. We may come from different backgrounds and different things may affect us, but it is important that we come together and respect one another for what those differences are. And I challenge you today as you consider this resolution, that you call out hate and bigotry and things that divide us, because you have to, if you really believe in the words that we just heard on this screen, and if you really believe in Dr. Martin Luther King's message. Otherwise, I think your vote may be in vain, and otherwise I think that his message may have died. So members, don't let that happen. I urge and I vote.
Representative Jackson. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I too rise in strong support of SJR 18002. I want to tell you just a little bit about the place where I come from. The legacy of Dr. King is particularly important in my incredibly, beautifully, wonderfully diverse community in Aurora. It serves as a microcosm, I believe, of our entire nation. Students of the Aurora Public School District come from over 130 different countries, speaking over 160 now languages. In my House district alone, House District 42, 43% of our community is Hispanic, 21% of my community are African Americans. In my House district, we are incredibly proud to have the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Library. And in front of that library stands a 7-foot tall, I believe the only full statue of Dr. King in the state of Colorado. People gather around that statue. We have lots of events at MLK, and we do so because that statue, that library, that center of our community serves to remind all of us about the teachings of Dr. King. Dr. King showed us all how to transform hardship into hope and adversity into action. His legacy is a lesson and an invitation for us to cherish our neighbors as they exist in their individual identities, while also building our shared identity to make our collective community stronger. Dr. King's message hasn't died in my community. We support each other, and we love each other. I, too, urge an aye vote. Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in strong support of SJR 18-002. This is my 6th year on the House floor and my final year here, in which I'll be able to hear the reading of the resolution honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Every year, our chamber recites the quotes of a man who has inspired billions of human beings across our Mother Earth, billions of human beings. A man who espoused the greatest of attributes assigned to us by the Creator, and that's the attribute of love. His love did not come from just his Christian faith, where he was taught to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. Dr. King's love also resonated from the fact that we are human beings first and foremost, that we are all from the Creator who loves us, and we are brothers and sisters one to another. Dr. King preached about supporting those institutions that help the human being, such as unions. Let us not forget how much he supported the unions. He preached about not just equality, but equity amongst human beings. His teachings inspired the environmental movement, discussing the separation of moral judgment from technological advancements. And I sit and I wonder, have we understood his words as we read them? Do we understand what is meant when he said, we must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society when machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people? The giant triplets of racism, materialism, and militarism are capable of being conquered. Do we understand these words? I ask because a few years back, the late, great, honorable, wonderful friend, Representative John Buckner, and I both posed the question, the idea, that it is unacceptable to just repeat Dr. King's words and not live them. It is not acceptable to read Dr. King's words, but not aspire to them. I often wonder what he would think about our country and what the world looks like today if he were alive. What would he think when reading the news of mass shootings that target people because of their race, religion, LGBTQ status, immigration status, gender? What would he think when reading about a president who calls white supremacists very fine people and call Haitians and Africans and their countries places of excrement? I was careful, Madam Speaker. What would he think when reading about representatives, senators, and other elected officials degrading, dehumanizing, demonizing other human beings with the use of the word illegal? That is not unifying language, that is divisive. What would he think when in 2017 there are still churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples being burned to the ground? What would he think as he attended the funerals of those who gave their lives for social justice, like Heather Heyer, a 21st century freedom fighter who was killed by white supremacists? I imagine he would hearken back to our Pledge of Allegiance and those amazing words, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, one nation, one nation, under God, indivisible. It is not just enough to quote Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at this well. His words derive from the sanctity of his faith, the grounding in morality, and the gentleness of love. As a body, and on this day, let's remember, it is our duty to fight for equity, to fight for our Mother Earth, to fight for social justice, and to hold each other accountable to a higher moral standard as elected officials of the people, to fight for the homeless and those who are oppressed, for those who die when it is cold outside. It is an honor to suffer for our fellow human beings. That is what we are sent here to do, is to suffer for one another, because in that we're able to love one another. Our time has run out for platitudes, for just saying the words of Dr. Martin Luther King. Let us rise up to meet our better selves. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Once again, I rise in support of SJR 002.
Representative Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure and honor to serve with you.
It is a pleasure and honor to serve with you.
What's up, y'all? How y'all doing? All right, cool. I just want to make sure. I don't have anything prepared, but I just was thinking about a trip that I just got back from Israel a couple months ago. And I had a privilege to go with a great group of individuals, and I'm going to name their names, even though it may not be appropriate. You usually don't do that, but I want you to know that this was a very much a bipartisan trip. I had a chance to go to Israel with Majority Leader Becker, Assistant Majority Leader Garnett, Minority Leader Neville, Representative Esgar, Senator Finberg, Senator Gardner, Senator Cook, Representative McKean, and Senator Don Coram, and a host of other individuals. And you know, when you think about MLK Day, what I think about is I had an opportunity to go on an amazing trip, and it was cultural, it was business, it was political, and it was faith. And we had an opportunity to go to a couple of historic places. And one of the places that we went to was the Jordan River. Now, you're only supposed to really get baptized one time, but when you live the way that I live, you might have to get baptized a couple times, if that's what you believe in. And so, both of us. So I had the privilege of being baptized with Representative Neville and his wife. And it was a host of folks who had a chance to see us do that. And one of the things we did at the end of this trip was we came back and talked about, how it impacted us and what do we remember the most about it. And I just said, you know what, for me, I can't leave this place with the kind of spirit I have in my heart and love for people after having spent the time that we did on that trip, regardless of political philosophies and beliefs and differences, and then come back here and then not implement those things that we practice. And so for me, that's what MLK Day is about, right? Because he wasn't MLK when it was convenient. He was MLK every day. He loved people every single day, regardless of what happened to him. Now, whether you believe in Jesus or not, the reality is man existed. Whether you believe he was God or not, the reality is the man existed. And one thing I want to say is, if you look at the way he lived his life, and you look at the way that MLK lived his life, and many other men, many other women, many other people who have fought for civil justice, is they were beaten. They were raped. They were hung. They were destroyed, obliterated, physically, emotionally, spiritually, in any capacity. But in many cases, they stayed steadfast to that belief that the way they carried their life out and the way they acted was through love. And so for me, to have gone on that trip and to come back here and not implement those things, and many of you have also been on that trip, it would be very difficult to do. It's important that we keep that mindset. Many of us may have not had a chance to go to Israel, but you've had experiences in your life, whether it was a loved one of your own or someone that you cared about deeply, and in that moment, your spirit, your heart is not callous, it's changed, it's different. And so we come down here and we're at this building and sometimes we forget that. But I just wanted to be a reminder today that, as Dr. King said, we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters or perish together as fools. We get down here for 120 days away from our families, away from our normal life, which we don't have a normal life anymore. But we get away from that and we sacrifice all this time to not get down here and to get nothing accomplished. And we had a very successful session this past year. But I think we have to keep that in mind, that even in an election year when folks are worried about primary, all that stuff doesn't matter to me. We're still here because we believe the same philosophy that Dr. King said. We're not here to get reelected. We're here to do good things to get policy passed for the people in the state of Colorado. And if we're in a position next year, so be it. But if we're not, we're not. But at the end of the day, yes, Democrat, Republican, maybe you fall 1% on the other side of that line. But I grew up in a community where blues and reds killed each other. And I get down here and we're blues and reds. And we shouldn't be killing each other. We should be having the same mindset that Dr. King had. And I think after 50 years of his death, we want to continue on that heritage. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to serve with all of you. So thank you. Appreciate the time.
Representative Buckner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Martin Luther King had so many amazing quotes, but one of my favorites is, "There becomes a time when silence is betrayal." There becomes a time when silence is betrayal. And all of you remember my late husband, the Honorable John W. Buckner, and one of his favorite phrases, and thank you, Representative Salazar, for reminding all of us, John Buckner used to say, "Call it what it is. If it's racism, call it racism. Call it what it is." Because, it's hard to have courageous conversations, but that's what we need to do here, because we can do that civilly. When I walk in this building every day, I think you all know I always have a smile on my face. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I really do love all of you. And all of you who have worked with me know that. We don't agree on everything, but we talk about it. And that's what we need to continue to do. I have 3 beautiful granddaughters, and you saw one of them the other day, Sydney. Sydney is 9, well, she'll be 9 next month. And Sydney had something happen to her at school last week. Broke my heart to see my little granddaughter question about color. I won't go into details, but Sydney said, "Ma'am, you've told me lots of things that happened to you when you were young." And she said, "I want you to tell me those things again." And I told some of you this last year, but I want to tell you again because she broke down and cried. She wanted me to go swimming with her. I can't swim. I have this fear of water. And the reason I do is because when I was a young girl, I wasn't allowed to go to the swimming pool with the Caucasian kids because I was told that if I wanted to swim, I could come the night before they cleaned the pool, before they changed the water. Well, that broke my heart. My parents weren't rich people. My mother was a cleaning lady. My father was a mechanic. They were self-made people. They only went to 6th grade in school because they had to drop out of school to work the fields for their parents. But they made sure I got the best education possible. But I'm going back to this and I'm regressing a little because my parents said, "Janet, you can't go to the pool, but we'll build a swimming pool in our yard." And I knew we couldn't afford to do that, but that was their attitude. They took the high road. I had a girlfriend, Susan Conrad, whose father was a doctor, and they had an indoor swimming pool because they were wealthy. So I finally got to go to Susan's house to swim. And when they finally integrated the swimming pools in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, I took swimming lessons, and I was getting ready to get my certificate that I was going to be able to swim. I swam halfway down the pool, and 2 white boys called me the N-word. I'm okay. I stopped swimming. I went down to the bottom of the pool, and I almost drowned. So I guess why I'm telling you this is because that feeling never goes away. That feeling never goes away. So I had to tell my granddaughter this story. And she was in tears and told me some other things that have happened to her. So I don't want my 3 granddaughters to go through what I went through. That's why we have to talk, people. If John Buckner were alive today, he would tell those granddaughters. I was down at the Capitol to make sure that every kid is treated fairly. Janet Buckner is down here, not just for Sydney, but for all of your kids and for all of your grandkids. I'm here for everyone. So, I'm going to leave you with this, another Martin Luther King quote. We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today, and the urgency is now. Thank you so much, and I love all of you, and thanks for listening to my story, but I just had to tell you because I'm 70 years old, still can't swim. But I just want you to know that as hard as this was to tell you this today, I had to share it with you because it was reality. And it's still in my heart today. And I hope all of you can just take my hand and go with me and just try to do better. It may take time, but we're all going to do better. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Buckner. Representative Exum.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning, colleagues. I'd like to share a quote and a little story about my grandson that I think will be encouraging to you. The ultimate measure of a man or a woman is not where he or she stands in moments of comfort or convenience, but where he or she stands in times of challenge or controversy. That was from Dr. Martin Luther King's Strength to Love. You know, when we think about our kids and our grandkids and about the Bible teaches us about planting seeds of life. So when they need that seed of life, when you're not around or when you're not there to encourage them, you know, they'll make the right decisions. A few months ago, I was down in Phoenix where 2 of my grandchildren live and was having a conversation with my 18-year-old grandson. Yes, I have an 18-year-old grandson. And he's a wonderful, wonderful young man. He's a freshman at Arizona Christian University, a very good soccer player. And we were just talking, and he said, Grandpa, he says, I just want to get to learn to know God better so I'll know what he wants me to do. And my heart just sunk because I've been planting seeds for my kids and for my grandkids, and to hear him say, I want to get to know God better and better each day so I'll know what my assignment is. It's 18-year-olds. So, and I'll leave you with this. In the book of Micah, God tells us what to do. In the latter part of the 6th chapter, 8th verse, latter part of that 8th verse, it says, to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. I love you all. God bless you.
Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is the 5th time I've been here for the MLK resolution, and I've never come down to speak. And I'm coming now because I learned something new about Martin Luther King this year, which is we all know that he was one of the leaders of the Montgomery bus boycott, along with Rosa Parks. But you may not have known, and I learned this year, that the Montgomery bus boycotts were about civil rights, but they were actually about women's rights as well. Because in that time, the back of the bus was a frequent place for rape and sexual assault in southern states. Rosa Parks had been a sex assault investigator for the NAACP, and she saw the back of the bus as one of the most unsafe places for women of color. And so she took the historic steps she did, and Martin Luther King took the historic steps he did to protest the bus boycotts, to protest the bus segregation by launching the Montgomery bus boycotts, largely because he was standing in support of women's rights and standing against sexual assault. And I think that's remarkable and an aspect of the history of Martin Luther King that gets lost and is especially potent today. So I rise in support of this resolution, and I want to share that story with you because we can recognize in it that all of these fights are fights that we still have to make today.
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In 1964, the Reverend King authored the letter from the Birmingham jail while he is being detained. And in it, he answered the criticism levied against him by pastoral peers within the Christian community who incredibly called his actions unwise and untimely. But Reverend King didn't just hear the word, he applied the word. Reverend King knew it was no use to curse the darkness, for that is the language of darkness, and it sees no difference from itself. The Bible assures us we will all have tribulations, but it is what you do with the trials that you have. Will you find joy in your suffering, or will you join the darkness by cursing it? It was during this time that King wrote his most voracious defenses of the nonviolent principles that shine a light in the darkness. He said, I am in Birmingham because injustice is here. Just as the Apostle Paul left his village of Tarsus and carried the gospel of Jesus Christ to the corners of the Greco-Roman world. So I am compelled to carry the gospel of freedom beyond my hometown. On reading this incredible letter, you were reminded of Dr. King's generational ties to the church. His grandfather and father were both Baptist ministers. In his letter, he reflected upon the lives of great men and women of character, whose words and deeds stirred within him a hope, a confident assurance that one day, from every corner of every coffee shop and courthouse across America, the sweet sound of free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last, would ring out. Thank you.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Where's Representative Singer? You know what's coming, don't you? You know, I rise in support of this resolution, but my favorite speech up here on a resolution is now what? You know, we've gotten up here and we've spoken about Dr. Martin Luther King, and we've pointed fingers and chewed on each other and so forth about what we ought to be doing. And colleagues, I've got to confess, going back in history as a college student in the early to mid 60s, I looked at Martin Luther King as a man, you know, not as a hero or someone that was going to have a day named after him. It was just in the news, and I watched that, and yes, I even wore some of those narrow ties that you saw up there on that video during that time. And I mean, we'd discuss it with my college roommates. We call them suite mates in because you had two guys on each side and shared the same bathroom. And those two guys were black. I told the story of Big Daddy and Fast Eddie and other college teammates that I had, and we discussed it and talked about it. And I was an ignorant farm boy. I didn't know the difference that you're supposed to have racial attitudes. I just saw people as people. So then as I grew older, you know, I thought, you know, I was looking at Martin Luther King, and we talked about his weaknesses too, which you haven't heard anything here today. You know, he had weaknesses. He was fallible. He was a man. And then as I grew older, I began to realize that, you know, we kind of all make mistakes, and we're all fallible. And began to accept the fact that we all fall short, because there was only one guy that was ever perfect. And we talk here in this chamber about getting along. And I can say this with a complete clear conscience because I do not tweet. But I would ask you, when you tweet about people on the opposite side of the aisle, how many of those have been positive? Just saying. Was Dr. King perfect? No. Did his human fallibilities keep him from pursuing his dreams? No. Did the criticisms that he received for being a human being and the mistakes that he made as a human being keep him from pursuing his dream? No. Do we honor him for his mistakes? No. We honor him for his mission, his purpose. I think it's so critical at this time in our nation, because you've heard from this well this morning, the passion about what's wrong with our nation, at this time in our state, and more importantly, colleagues, at this time in our chamber, in this chamber, and our own personal lives, that we consider the totality of what Dr. Martin Luther King did and what he stood for. Today, of all days, I hope and pray that we in this chamber will accept the fact we're all imperfect. We are all imperfect. We are going to mess up, even with our best intentions. But each of us has a dream. That's why we're here. Each of us has a dream, whether that be for our grandchildren, whether that be for our children, our families, our constituents. So I would ask that as we honor Dr. Luther King's memory, I would ask that we overlook our human imperfections and that we take the time to sit down with each other and discuss our dreams. I don't think that's happened in the 5 years I've been here. Hasn't happened. It starts today and it starts here. It doesn't start in Washington. Colleagues, if we do not dream together, Dr. Luther King's dream will surely die alone. It's up to us.
Representative Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for this opportunity to strongly support this Senate Joint Resolution 18-2. And members, something that I'd like to reinforce about the importance of remembering the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. is that it wasn't just himself who we are sort of commemorating today. It is also everyone who he led, and he was a leader. He was at the point of the spear, but we must also remember those who marched with him, those who were also on that spear, who were leading in this movement for civil rights. And among them in this coalition, because it was a coalition, if you look out on that video that we just saw, it was diversity in that crowd. And particularly also in the Jewish community, it was very important to support the civil rights movement. Among them was Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who fled Europe during the Nazi era. And he also led and spoke out against the racism in our country. Let us also remember those who were also killed and sacrificed much in pursuit of greater civil rights and equality. For example, in Mississippi, 2 Jewish men, Andrew Goodman and Mickey Schwerner, who were killed while they were also with their fellow African-American civil rights activist, James Chaney. So I think that's also a message that we can take with us today, to make sure that we also recognize the great diversity of our country and how it is wonderful. And when we talk about one country and one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty, and hopefully we'll always have justice for all. Thank you.
Assistant Minority Leader West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It looks like I picked the right day to wear my skinny tie, Representative Wilson. Colleagues, I want to thank you all for sharing your stories, sharing your hearts. Representative Coleman, Representative Buckner, Representative Wilson, the three of you have a unique ability to speak to this chamber, to help us to unite as a body, and I thank you for your leadership. And that's really what Dr. King talked about, and that is coming together and uniting. After Charlottesville, I think we were all left in shock. We were left in dismay, and we were left with great sadness. My takeaway as I joined the speaker that day in calling out bigotry, racism, in any form that we see it in our country, I recalled the most important part of Dr. King's speech for me, and that is him talking about children coming together. Let's not forget that racism, bigotry, and prejudice aren't inherent. They're taught. They're learned. With each child, we have the ability to correct the course. So for me, the message of Dr. Martin Luther King, it's three things. We need to learn about his legacy, learn about his message, remember what that means, and commit to making the future a different place. As I look at Representative Roberts, who joins this chamber in his 20s, I recall that Dr. King did phenomenal work as a young man. And as I shared with you last year, and I'll leave you with these words, and as I think about our children and how they can unite us and erase bigotry and racism and prejudice. You're never too young to inspire, never too young to lead. Learn, remember, commit. Thank you, members.
Representative Weissman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We pause and we hereby resolve to commemorate the life and legacy of Dr. King this year and every year, as we absolutely should. But I do believe that this year is a bit different. This year is different because this year marks the 50th anniversary of when Dr. King gave his life, lost his life, in the furtherance of his ideals and the ideals of millions who worked with him in the 60s. And I'm in very strong agreement with my colleague from Aurora on the second point, which is that this year is different because I think the need for all of us to recommit to the values of equality and compassion and nonviolence is greater than it's ever been in my life, and I think in the lives of many of us in this chamber right now. In 1963, Dr. King said, in a clip that we didn't see here, "We refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt." So I want us to stop and think for just a minute about the Bank of Justice, because when we are here, whether we realize it or not, we are all custodians of that account. We might be tempted to view the Bank of Justice as a savings account, one where automatically the progress of history toward greater equality and toward sweeping away vestiges of our terrible chapters of our past makes regular deposit building up the balance into a positive direction. Maybe I used to think that way. Maybe some of us did too. But I believe that recent history illustrates we do not have the luxury of taking that view. Because sometimes the balance in the Bank of Justice goes both ways. Sometimes checks get written off the account at the Bank of Justice, draining it down and making us all more poor. When anyone says anything like my other colleague from Aurora experienced, the person doing and saying such things is writing checks off the balance at the Bank of Justice. When anyone, particularly in an elected capacity anywhere in our country, pursues a rhetoric of racial divisiveness for some sense of gain, that is writing checks out of the Bank of Justice. To scapegoat communities of immigrants who work and pay taxes and support their families and ultimately, at the end of the day, dream the same American dream that our own ancestors dreamed, that too is writing checks off the Bank of Justice. And engaging in loose talk about violence, whether toward a person or a nation or anyone in between, is also writing checks off the Bank of Justice. So I think we need to take our role here as custodians of that very seriously, because we still can and must make deposit into the Bank of Justice and move the balance in the right way. We do that when we work to eliminate racial disparities in our criminal justice system and in our educational system. We do that any time that we stand up to slurs against women or GLBTQ people or immigrants, whether one person at a time or a community at a time. We do that when we renew our commitment to the Colorado Civil Rights Division, which is the part of our government that continues the work of keeping discrimination out of housing and employment and public accommodations, like Dr. King and millions of others fought for decades ago. Overall, we do that when we make the law that we all make, us here now, work and be fair for everyone and not just some privileged few. In 1963, Dr. King continued in the March on Washington speech, "We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity in this nation." And I think we should refuse to believe that too. And we should do more than that. We should actively contribute in what we do to the Bank of Justice. We should actively contribute in what we do to the vaults of opportunity. I believe that is our role here as elected officials. I believe that is our obligation here. We are uniquely situated to do so. We are the custodians of the dreams of 1963, and of 2018, and beyond. In what we do here, let's work to keep those dreams alive. Thank you, and I am in strong support of this resolution.
Representative Benavides.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wasn't going to come forward, but in listening to people, I felt moved to come forward and talk to you, even though I didn't prepare anything. And part of the reason is that some of you know, some of you may not know, I grew up in Denver, in Northeast Denver, which was a community in the 50s and 60s of probably 95% African Americans. And in that community, I went to school, grade school, high school, and, you know, people lived with one another. All of my playmates from the age of 5 were African Americans. And so, other than watching TV, I watched black and white newsreels in the 50s of what was going on in the South, and it was very real, you know, to us. We would watch those things. It didn't happen directly in our community in Northeast Denver on a daily basis like that, but when we stepped out of the community, we could feel the different encounters with racism. So for me, I was sheltered. My parents and my neighbors' parents made sure that they looked out for all of us. And so it wasn't a concern till I stepped out of the community. When I went to college, my roommate was a white female. She was from Indiana. Her family was wealthy. And I would come home on the weekends. I just went to CU in Boulder, and I would work on the weekends. But when her family came to town, she wanted to make sure they would meet me and meet my family. So they came to Denver, and they went to a nice dinner. And when they came into my neighborhood, they came into our home, except for the mother. The mother refused to leave the taxi because the neighborhood was too scary for her. So I just want you to know that racism is real, and what happens and continues to happen through the people, say, with Black Lives Matters. You know, we think of that as that's past its time, but it hasn't. When young people, particularly young men, African American, Latinos, Native American, they are the highest number of people that are shot by law enforcement. And arguably, someone could say, well, they deserved it. But when we still have to teach our young men to be careful, to watch what they say, to watch where they put their hands, we have to know racism is real. I was represented by Wilma Webb, by Wellington Webb, when they were in this house. And that fight has not gone away. It continues on. So I would urge all of you to not forget that. And as we consider any bill that comes forward, consider how it impacts communities different than our own. And it is real to all of us. Those scars don't go away. Thank you.
Representative Herod.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise in strong support of this resolution. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was almost 200 years after these words were set to paper that in 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King led a movement, the March on Washington. People from all over the United States and from every walk of life gathered that day. Over 250,000 were in attendance. They gathered to draw attention to the continuing challenges and inequalities African Americans continued to endure 100 years after emancipation. They saved their money for bus rides, some walked. They gathered and they heard the mighty oratory of Dr. Martin Luther King, one that belongs to the ages. I dream a dream, he bellowed out, a dream that this nation will rise up and live up to its creed. A dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but rather by the content of their character. I dream a dream. Because of that march, the Civil Rights Act was passed. Because of that march, the Voting Rights Act was signed into law. Because of that march, in the years that followed the Voting Rights Act, record numbers of African Americans registered to vote, and across the South, blacks were elected to public office. Because of that march, America followed a path to greater fairness and equality. And yes, because they marched, I stand in front of you today, elected to this state house as the first LGBT African American to do so, and I stand with 8 members of the Black Caucus, 6 in this chamber, the greatest number in the history of Colorado. I will never take for granted the efforts of those who came before me, those who marched, protested, and spoke out against injustice. Nor will I dishonor them by suggesting that nothing has changed. Because they marched, my path is brighter and it is much easier. I will also not rest on their laurels and claim that the work towards equality is complete. That too would dishonor their legacy. Complacency is not an option. Vigilance remains critical. My sense is that no one really disputes that equality is a good goal. No one in this chamber. We all believe that in our hearts. Providing a definition of what that is and how we get there and how it will be implemented, however, is a great source of debate in this chamber. If it can be implemented and measured by the simple and yet profound words articulated by Dr. Martin Luther King in his I Have a Dream speech, but 55 years after those profound words, we continue the conversation, and we must. And while I recognize that progress is inherently slow and incremental, and change is not flashy like a tornado, rather, as I once read, it's like a grain of salt, a grain of sand in an oyster. Patience is a virtue, and good things come to those who wait. But I have rarely been described as a patient person. How can I be when police brutality is not a thing of the past? In fact, the urgency that Dr. King spoke of, the urgency of now, is not behind us. Today, African Americans are overrepresented in our jails and our prisons. We must work to ensure that Lady Liberty works equally for all of those in the criminal justice system. Today, while 83% of white students earn a high school diploma, only 69% of Colorado black students leave high school with a diploma. The school-to-prison pipeline has led a large percentage of young African-American males to fill our already overcrowded jails, and their schools remain to be woefully unfunded. Michelle Alexander famously wrote that the criminal justice system is the new Jim Crow. But I have come to realize that the criminal justice system is a new Jim Crow. Education, I fear, is another. Although the African American economy continues to grow, Blacks still struggle with great unemployment, far greater than the national average. In fact, in Colorado, the black unemployment is twice as much as the white unemployment. We must work together as a chamber to fight to break down these inequalities. And then, on August 12th, 2017, there was a torchlight parade on the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia. Protesters marched in formation, chanting, "Jews will not replace us." Some made monkey noises at black counter-protesters. Some yelled, "Dylann Roof is a hero." They waved nationalist banners. Many of them carried sticks and shields. I had thought naively that such open bigotry was a thing of the past. I stood stunned and breathless, tied to my TV screen as I watched the events unfold. I was scared. I was scared for myself, and I was scared for this country that I love so much. What had happened to that dream that Dr. King had spoke of? Is this really our America? Who are we? I must say that I was only grateful that my grandfather, Johnny Herod, had only passed a few months before, but had not lived to see that day. You see, my grandfather marched in Mississippi. My grandfather fought to desegregate the schools in Water Valley, Mississippi, and became one of the first African-American superintendents. Weeks after the events of Charlottesville, I had the great opportunity to speak on stage with a Holocaust survivor. She came to me in tears, and she apologized. She said, "I'm sorry this is still happening in America, and I am ashamed that this is happening today, and I will fight alongside you to make sure that this never happens again." The urgency of now leads me to embrace this resolution wholeheartedly. And I reach out to all of you in this chamber so that we can work together toward a greater equality, one that is attainable by all. This battle should not be predicated on fear and hate, but like MLK, our battle should be based on hope and love and the aspirations of everyday people. The discourse is not effective if it relies on shouting or relies on myths or half-truths and breathless attacks. For one nation, under God, indivisible, for the liberty and justice for all, let us march together. And with the fierce urgency of now, let us work together as a chamber to ensure that bigotry and hatred and racism is eradicated from our great state of Colorado and from our great nation. Members, I urge an aye vote on this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Herod. Any further discussion? Okay. Members, the night before Martin Luther King was assassinated, he was talking to striking sanitation workers. And he said, "We've got to give ourselves to this struggle until the very end. We've got to see it through. Now more than ever, we need to understand his vision and make sure that we all have a personal responsibility to live out his dream." Any further discussion? The motion before us is the adoption of SJR 18-002. All of those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying no. SJR 002 is adopted. Representative Herod.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I ask that we add the morning roll call as co-sponsors.
Seeing no objection, the morning roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Thank you, members, for your consideration.
Wonderful.
Madam Majority Leader Becker. Yeah, we can go to announcements and introductions. We have a couple things that we're going to potentially need to read across the desk. So announcements and introductions. Assistant Majority Leader Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, thanks for your attention today. I really appreciate hearing from all of you. This was not planned, but my dad's in the chamber, and he, as many of you know, he was district attorney in the 20th Judicial District for almost 10 years. He sent the governor his letter of resignation yesterday, which is a huge blow to the Boulder community, but he is moving on to continue to pursue his passion as an attorney in the private sector. But I think it's a great honor for me to stand here and to recognize, as we talk about public service, how he represented his community as district attorney. We didn't always agree on stuff, but as I'm sure Minority Leader Neville knows, but you know what my dad always showed was through leadership and through talking and through honest conversation that you can always come to a compromise. And in a day and age when so many people in the public sector are resigning for the wrong reasons, it's important to recognize all of the work that you did, and you're resigning for all the right reasons. So thank you for your service and for your leadership, and I would love it if we could give you all a round of applause for all you've done.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as a member of the Boulder County community, I couldn't echo the thoughts of Representative Garnett any better. And so with that, I would like to remind the Joint Technology Committee that they are to meet 10 minutes upon adjournment in Senate Committee Room 352, JTC. We will see you in 10 minutes upon adjournment in Senate Committee Room 352.
Any further announcements? Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I did have only one announcement, but I think I've got a second one. Representative Garnett, I thought you were going to say he is resigning for all the right reasons, which was to be grandpa. There you go. Folks, I looked at the calendar. Next week is a short week, but Friday night is the Western Stock Show Junior Livestock Sale. Do not forget your money. We've only got 4 days next week to get it together. Thank you.
Any further announcements or introductions? Representative Buck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I request that and I did check with the majority leader over there, that I can have January 30th and January 31st off.
That is okay with me. You will be excused. Any further announcements or introductions? Madam Majority Leader Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess till noon today.
All right, that sounds good. Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess until noon. And members, please do take a moment to go and see our beautiful new committee rooms. It is worth taking the time to go check them out. Thank you and have a wonderful weekend.